For rebuilding teams near the bottom of the standings, especially if they've been there for a few consecutive seasons, the draft offers a glimmer of hope in order to help turn things around, as every year there's usually a few guys in each draft class capable of producing at a high level and elevating the play of teams in desperate need of it. However, in just as many instances, if not more, the hype surrounding some prospects greatly outweighs the actual player they go on to be in the league. This doesn't mean that they all go on to be busts by any means, but if they don't play up to expectations and, for example, someone else picked after them does, it's going to leave the team with some regrets. This brings us to the topic of today's video, where we will be discussing 5 teams that would probably like a do-over in the 2019 NBA draft if given the chance. Before we get started though, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as all support is very much appreciated. Now, with that being said, let's begin. The first player on this list of potential regrets for teams will also definitely be the most controversial selection, so hear me out first, because it is Zion Williamson. Williamson was the #1 pick this year. He's been a viral sensation since high school, and every single time he steps on the court, he puts on a show. The only problem with that, though, is that he has yet to even step on the court this season. Now, one injury is by no means reason to write a player off, however, it can be a reason for concern, and in Zion's case, this isn't just some one-time thing. Dating back to high school, Zion was forced to miss a few months of game time during AAU season because of a deep knee bruise he suffered during warm-ups of one of his games. Then in college, at Duke, he infamously busted through his sneaker and suffered a knee sprain, forcing him to miss 3 weeks of games. Then in Summer League this year, he only played 1 game before suffering yet another bruised left knee that caused him to miss the rest of Summer League play. And then finally, bringing us up to date currently, he suffered yet another knee injury in a preseason game, which has been the reason he has yet to play in a game this year. Knee injuries are some of the most seriously concerning injuries basketball players can experience, especially if they're a recurring thing. For Zion in particular, his biggest strength by far is his combination of strength and jump out of the gym athleticism, but by relying so heavily on that while also weighing a massive 280 pounds, he continues to put his knee at risk. Obviously, when he returns to the court, which is rumored to be soon, he very easily could pick right back up where he left off and look every bit like the future star he was destined to be, but for the sake of his own health, he will likely need to adjust some things with how he plays. We've seen a similar trajectory from Blake Griffin throughout his career, having been an athletic beast early on, but toning back the highlight dunks as his career progressed because of continuous injuries, and I fear Zion might be headed down the same road, especially when you look at how well Ja Morant has been playing for the surprisingly good Grizzlies team. The Pelicans may be having second thoughts given the risk involved here. Next up on this list of possible regrets comes not much further down the draft at pick number 3, where the New York Knicks selected RJ Barrett. Barrett, like Zion, had been a prodigy in high school, labeled by many as the next big thing and possible face of Canadian basketball down the line. He even played alongside Zion at Duke, and while often getting outshined, did still have a terrific year and showed off a skill set that many NBA teams would have loved. In theory, Barrett as a prospect was someone that brought a little bit of everything to the table, as a wing who could handle the ball like a lead guard, create for others at a high level, finish well in the paint, play good defense, and even shoot the ball a little from the perimeter. So far for the Knicks, though, things have been a little bit of a struggle. Being taken as high as he was, with a game seemingly ready for the league, he was expected to be in contention for the Rookie of the Year award and help the Knicks stay in contention in the standings. Yet so far, his production has been inefficient and empty, and the Knicks find themselves at the bottom of the standings. Now, by no means am I blaming Barrett for the Knicks' struggles, because that would be just completely absurd and unjustified, but like many of his teammates around him, he has been disappointing. He's scoring about 14 points per game, which isn't too bad, but he's doing so while only shooting 39% from the field and 30% from 3. He's still very young and has plenty of time to continue to develop, but he might not ever live up to the hype of a top 3 pick, while other players selected further down the draft may have been a better fit for this team. Next up on this list also just so happened to be teammates with the other 2 on this list, and I promise you that it was all just a coincidence and I didn't do it on purpose, but it's Cam Reddish, who was selected at pick number 10 by the Atlanta Hawks. Coming out of high school, Reddish was a top 3 recruit because, in theory, his skill set had the potential to be exactly what teams love in the modern age of basketball. However, his entire season at Duke had fewer ups and more downs than they would have liked, and he oftentimes struggled. His shot didn't fall, he struggled mightily finishing at the rim, and he seemed to disappear on the court for long stretches, lacking in aggression and confidence. Despite how inefficient he was in college, he was still a firm lottery talent in the eyes of scouts because of his physical traits that he possesses that you simply can't teach. He's 6'8" with incredibly long arms, moves very fluidly out on the court, and had the physical tools to hopefully become a good defender. Yet, in his time as a Hawk, not much at all has changed since his days at Duke, and maybe those warnings should have been taken more seriously than they were. He's been given every opportunity to play on a consistent basis, has started 24 of the 35 games he's played, and gets featured on offense quite a bit, yet is only averaging 8 points while shooting the ball 32% from the field and 26% from 3. Those are some of the worst marks in the league, and for a guy who was drafted because of his scoring potential and specifically his shooting ability, it's scary. A few picks later in the lottery, players like Tyler Hero and PJ Washington were selected, both of which have been having tremendous seasons in year 1 for their respective teams, so you can't help but wonder what could have been if the Hawks maybe took one of them instead. Next up is the final pick of the lottery, being Romeo Langford, who the Celtics selected 14th overall. As has been a recurring theme in this video, Langford had very high expectations coming out of high school, and before the college season started, many thought his name would be in the conversation for the number 1 overall pick. As someone whose profile was being as a scoring guard at the shooting guard spot, his struggles shooting the ball persisted over the course of the entire season, and his shooting mechanics from deep concerned most scouts analyzing his game. Plus, his season was ended by a thumb injury, so he entered the offseason on the sidelines, waiting for it to recover. By the end of the year, most mock drafts had him falling outside of the lottery, further down in the first round, especially with the amount of talent that was in the middle of this draft class. But the Celtics took a chance on him, and that was risky then and still risky now. He spent most of the early part of this season in the G League, rehabbing and working his way back to form on the court, but since he's returned to the main team, he's made appearances in 9 games, and has yet to make a significant impact in any of them. He's averaging only 2.3 points per game in those appearances, still hasn't shot the ball well, and more often than not doesn't even get playing time. Then, when you look at the players taken after him, such as Brandon Clark, Matisse Thybulle, and Sekou Doumbouya, all of which look very promising, the Celtics may be wishing they got one of those guys instead. And finally, the 5th player on this list is Jordan Poole, who was selected near the end of the first round at 28th overall by the Golden State Warriors, and while this may seem like a nitpick, I promise it's a justified selection. When Poole originally announced he was going to be entering the draft this year, many thought he was just testing the waters before returning to Michigan for another year to continue to get better, but when he kept his name in the draft, it was surprising. He's a combo guard that plays both guard positions, but realistically never showed the playmaking ability to be trusted at the point, so he's more of a scorer with the ball in his hands. Plus, he was never a good defender, so most scouts saw him as second-round talent with upside to potentially make his way into a rotation. When the Warriors took him at the end of the first round, it was questionable at the time, and is still proving to be even more questionable now. At mid-season, he's currently the least efficient player in the whole league, shooting a miserable 26% from the field and 24% from 3. His questionable shot selection exudes confidence, and he seems like someone that should be able to create points for himself off the dribble, but he just simply hasn't been able to finish plays with made baskets. The Warriors have had a history of drafting very well, so this miss is easy to write off and chalk up to them reaching for another young shooter, but nonetheless, they probably wish they went elsewhere with this selection. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below any other teams you think might be regretting their draft choices from this past year. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.